Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My pleasure to be here with you today. I'm going to spend probably the next 25, 30 minutes talking about these four common challenges that we see with legacy information management. And as Eve talked about in the introduction, we are very much a content management vendor, but we focus very much on the role that both content and data play in enterprise organizations. So as we get started today, what I really wanted to start with was some background information and some results from a recent survey that we conducted in the UK with financial services organizations. What I think is interesting about this survey and the results is that I believe they apply to all enterprise organizations. And the punchline and really the outcome here as we talk about enterprise information management, content, data management in organizations is that really over the last 20 plus years of enterprise information management, a lot of the challenges remain the same and nothing really has changed for these organizations. Simply put, the old way of managing content and data isn't really working anymore. If we had talked 20 years ago, and yes, I was around 20 years ago, we would have talked about these same challenges, right? Organizational systems not fully connected to each other. So literally 8 out of 10 respondents, or 80% of our respondents, indicated that they had multiple systems that they were working with. Those systems were not integrated to one another, and it was very difficult for them to find information. The average user spends more than 50 minutes a day looking for information. If you think about an 8-hour workday, 1 hour of it spent working, that's 15% productivity that is lost in the organization just in time spent looking for information. The average organization that responded to us had more than 9 existing information management systems inside their organization. So not connected to each other, they had multiple systems. You can see why it's very, very difficult for them to find information. Now, something else we'll talk about today is the importance of AI and how AI can help to solve some of these challenges and really help to marry content and data together more fully. And as you can see at the bottom of the survey, other information that we gathered from our respondents. 60% see the potential to automate routine or mundane tasks in their organization. We see real value in AI in helping to bring more data, more relevance to content and information in the organization. But that same 60%, literally the same number of respondents indicated that they lacked the skills and ability to capitalize on the benefits that AI bring to their organization. So when you look at it again, right, we have the same challenges that we had 20 years ago working with these legacy technologies like enterprise content management that have been in place for the past 20 years. So my argument and what I really wanted to share with you today is why we need to take a different approach to this. And so to kind of tie out to our title, 4 key reasons to modernize. The things I'm going to be talking about with you today really have to do with how smarter content, how AI helps you unlock information, increase the accuracy and relevancy of information that you deliver to knowledge workers, to end users in your organization. I'm also going to talk about the proliferation of information that we have to manage today, how modern content is more than just documents and scanned images, and why things like rich media are becoming more and more important to our customers as they work with their customers to provide a differentiated customer experience. I'm going to talk about some new compliance challenges and how those compliance challenges are impacting existing information in the organization and creating new requirements for how we work with that information. I know a lot of our audience today is very focused on governance and compliance. I think this is very important, particularly as we think about things like GDPR and the California Consumer Protection Act. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about cloud and why every journey to the cloud is different, and therefore having flexibility and leveraging cloud native technologies is critical for our customers. We recognize that cloud brings a lot of benefits. We recognize that it represents a lot of cost savings and a lot of expertise savings for organizations, but it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach. So we'll get into all 4 of those. And very simply, let's start by talking about smarter content. First and foremost, let's think about what information is. Foundationally, when we talk about information, particularly we talk about content and enterprise content management, information really is that marriage of data and content. It's data that makes content accessible. It's data that makes content contextual, allows us to really give users, knowledge workers, access to information in the context of the work that they are performing, in the context of different applications that they're working with. Data and content also help us to ensure that information is available anywhere to different users across different channels, across different devices inside the organization. And then finally, it's that data that really helps us to properly secure information, properly govern information inside the organization. Now, a lot of people, when we talk about data and content, when we talk about documents, scanned images, we'll talk about things like full text indexing. And certainly full text indexing has its value in an organization. But really, when we think about the type of data that we need to associate with content, it's data that has to do with specific information about that content. It's that data that helps us set retention policies on documents. It's that data, that metadata that helps us find documents, surface documents, deliver documents to knowledge workers. And if you have any experience with full text search, you get a lot of results. It's kind of like doing a Google search. You get a lot of results back. A lot of them may not be specifically relevant for the information you're working on. So the more specific, more refined we can get about that data, the better we can deliver information in the organization. So intelligent information management is really about accessibility, the contextualness of information, making that information available anywhere, anytime to people who need it and to people who have the proper rights to access that information, and making sure that longer term that information is well governed. So in that context, we need to think about the promise of artificial intelligence. And this is what we mean by smarter content. How can we marry artificial intelligence together with your content, your information, to really give you better understanding, better access to data associated with that? Really, the promise and foundationally of artificial intelligence is about understanding content and data as well as a knowledgeable human, but being able to do so at scale. And what we see from a benefit standpoint on the AI front is really not only can we get artificial intelligence and machine learning models to understand content as well as a human, to be as accurate as a knowledgeable human, but we can get them there very quickly. The training times are very small, and we can work across incredibly large sets of information. So this is what we mean by at scale. What do we want to get out of artificial intelligence, and what does smart content bring to us? First and foremost, it enables us to quickly recognize different types of content, to extract data and meaningful data from that content, use that data to enrich content metadata, which downstream allows us to make that information more findable, more relevant, more contextual for the organization. Now, there are other benefits to artificial intelligence. It can enable us to more predictively deliver information to knowledge workers when, where, and how they need it. It also allows us to analyze how people are using information and the importance of that information to the organization. So how can we surface higher value knowledge inside the organization? We can also recognize patterns and connections between information assets inside the organization. And we can even identify outlying data points. And for organizations who are concerned about fraud, this is a very, very important aspect of what artificial intelligence can bring to the organization. When we get some case studies later on, I'll explain how that benefits. Now, when we talk about artificial intelligence, a lot of people talk about commodity models, public AI services, and how we can use those services to surface information about content. Now, in this case, I'm going to use a very, very simple example around an F-150 pickup truck. I'm working with an asset here. It is not a traditional document. It's not a traditional scanned image, but it shows you how we can surface data about an asset that has no text associated with it, and really, I think, kind of illustrates some of the power of AI in enriching existing information inside the organization. And as we'll talk about in a moment, these visual assets, things like video, audio, and high resolution photos like this will become increasingly important inside the organization. So being able to address both text and non-text content is critical for a modern content platform. Now, in this circumstance, I actually went to Google Cloud Vision, and on their website, you can literally load an image and it'll return back what they call labels, or these textual data elements associated with this image. And what you can see here in terms of what we got back from Google Vision is some very non-specific information. Some of it's helpful. It tells us it's a Ford vehicle. It tells us it's a Ford F-Series, but some of it's not so helpful. It tells us land vehicle. It tells us it's a car. It's a motor vehicle, things that we probably already know about this asset. You can also see it's very centric. So it starts talking about things like wheels, fenders, hoods, things that are at the forefront of the image. What it doesn't tell you is anything about the actual model, and you can see here it's actually identified it as an F350, it's a 150, so some of the more specific information isn't very accurate. The bottom line for this is that generic models are trained with a bunch of different data, and as a result, the results that they return, the data labels that they apply to these images, tend to be very generic, and therefore the relevancy and accuracy of the information you can get out of AI here is pretty limited. Helpful from the standpoint of being able to help you search for information, but not very helpful from the standpoint of driving your business forward. So one of the key things that we see from a modern information management standpoint is this ability to utilize custom models, models that are trained with your own content, your own data, return much better results to you as an organization. And two things that we want to illustrate here. And again, this is just an example of business specific AI, but a good example here, if I'm looking at this image and I am Ford Motor Corp, what I'm really interested in is not just the brand, but having a proper identification of the model, what trim level it is. It happens to be a limited truck, what options it has on it. For example, 22-inch chrome wheels, what size cab is it? Is it Super Crew cab? What size bed does it have? And from a contextual standpoint, I might want to understand the color in my own color code, and I might also want to understand the setting in which this photo appears. If I'm a marketer, for example, and I want to reuse this information, having all this information helps me very quickly, very specifically find this. And again, this is an example, but it's a good example of how custom AI models that are really trained with your own content and data can return very, very specific information that will drive your business forward. Now, next topic, we want to talk about modern content. And I've already shown you an example with images. Traditionally, when we talked about content management, we talked about things like Word documents, PowerPoint documents, email, scanned images, and how we leverage technology to better organize this type of information. And these challenges still exist in the organization, but the diversity of content types has virtually exploded. So what we're dealing with today is not just scanned images and electronic documents and email, but we're also dealing with social media content. We're also dealing with audio files, photos, videos, a lot of content that comes into organizations from smart devices. So we have a very diverse set of content. We have a very large scale set of content. It's really interesting. We've been working with a top 10 property and casualty insurer. And as you look at them over the last 15, 20 years of working with enterprise content management, they've created about 10 billion objects inside their organization. Claims files, new customer onboarding, policy underwriting type documentation. But the use case that we're talking to them about has to do with how they manage SMS messages, how they manage email, and how they give their customer service representatives access to this information at the same time as they send it out to customers. In the course of a given month, with this new content type, email, SMS messaging going out to customers, they create 300 million objects a month. Think about that. That's almost 3.5 billion objects a year. So in the course of just a few years working with new content, that scale explodes beyond the existing scale of what they've accumulated over the past 15, 20 years. So we have very diverse content, we have high scale content, the tooling that we need to work with video content, photo content. How do we rendition this information? How do we annotate this information? How do we deal with time-based assets where we might only want a piece of a video to look at in this environment is all very, very important. So when we talk about modern content, what we're really talking about is a very diverse set of information. It's a set of information that comes into and has to be delivered across a variety of different mobile devices, different platforms, different points of engagement with customers. And at this point, you might be thinking, hey, you know, I get it. My marketing department sometimes has to deal with videos or photo or audio, but you know, it's not a real aspect of my business. Well, let me give you some very practical examples of how these modern content types are showing up in very traditional business interactions. First one, and one that we see very commonly with insurance customers, is around automobile claims or any kind of accident claim. Today, if you get in an accident, it's not about police reports. It's not about filing, you know, insurance information in a paper-based form. If you get in an accident, it's about photos, it's about video, perhaps even audio associated with that accident. So one of the big things that we see from insurance companies today is coming to us saying, how do we work with these new rich media types as part of the automobile claims process? And if we're talking about smarter content here in AI, things that they're trying to figure out is one, fraud detection, right? In a lot of cases, and surprising to me, but when people submit fraudulent claims, sometimes they use the same images over and over again as part of those claims. And if you think about an organization with thousands of underwriters and insurance adjusters, you know, they're not going to be able to know when the same photo is being reused across different claims. That's something that AI can absolutely help with. They also want to look at damage associated with accidents and begin to accumulate insight and intelligence about that damage so that they can provide more accurate estimates to customers. They can identify where estimates that they're getting from their repair network are out of range. So there's a lot of intelligence that they want to get out of pictures, video, and information. Another practical example here is customer service. If you think about modern customer service, you know, it's no longer about just email and phone interactions, but you've got chat, you've got social media. We have customers that want video testimonials from their customers. They want to utilize audio actively in the customer support process. So all sorts of different rich media formats, part of customer service. And again, if you think about smarter content here, think about things like sentiment analysis. If I'm looking at a diverse set of inbound customer information from a customer service standpoint, I might want to be very accurate in terms of identifying which customers are happy, which customers are most unhappy, and perhaps prioritizing my service activities against customers who are more unhappy. So we've talked about smarter content, we've talked about the diversity and explosion of content driving needs for organizations. Now let's talk about some compliance challenges. And some of the most immediate ones that we are seeing right now, one over the last year, year and a half, we've had to work with some of our European customers over GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And more recently, and this is a legislation that was enacted in 2018, but went into effect in January of this year, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And the key things that we see here, particularly from a modern content perspective, is that now consumers have the right to request what information you have about them, and they have the right to be forgotten. So if they look at that information and want you to delete it, you have to be able to go through and delete that. By the way, we talk about CCPA. Some customers say, yeah, I don't do business in Europe, I don't do business in California, this doesn't apply to me. Well, today, 14 other states are currently considering similar legislation to CCPA, and we expect this to become more and more common for doing business, not just in Europe, but also in the United States. So it's critical that we be able to manage information at a very granular level, And it's also critical that we be able to quickly and easily search across, and we talked earlier about all those existing information silos, search across those different information silos in the organization to get that back. So one, we want to bridge across those different silos, enable organizations to effectively search for and retrieve customer information from across a bunch of different silos, lines of business, and different business systems inside their organization. Two, we want to think about unbinding customer information. And what I mean here, particularly customer communications, is that we see, particularly for organizations with legacy print stream solutions like Content Manager on Demand, like Mobius Technologies, and a lot of companies have used these for things like billings, explanation of benefits, other high volume communications to customers. They're very efficient. They store information in a data format, and then they kind of do real-time rendering for customers. They also can push those print screens out for high volume print communications to customers. The problem we see is all that data is stored together, and there's no way to pull out individual customer information, and more importantly, delete that information if a customer requests it. So one of the things that we are working with customers on is taking those print streams, converting them into individual PDF documents, being able to kind of manage that at cloud scale. If you think about scanned images and documents, typically very large enterprises will have a billion, 2 billion sets of scanned images, documents. But when we start thinking about these customer communications and unbundling them, now we start thinking about billions of documents a year. So not only do we want to bridge these silos, unbind these communications, but because of the volume here, we've got to start thinking about how we automate retention and archiving and how we're smart about working with these extreme high volumes of information. One of the things we find with PrintStream and a lot of customer communications, which includes email, a lot of cases, not a lot of retention management, not a lot of records management applied. They've built up huge archives of customer communications dating back over 15, 20 years with really zero retention management policy. Another great opportunity for us to apply artificial intelligence to begin to auto-classify, categorize this information, and then be very smart, not only about how we retain, what information we potentially destroy here, but to where we put it. So if we're moving to the cloud, we want to think about where we store this information in the cloud. Maybe we don't need to use high cost active storage, but maybe we want to think about deep storage, archival tiers in the cloud that are much lower cost for information that we don't expect to retrieve quickly or to have to retrieve often. All of this comes down to, one, as we're doing this and increasing compliance and intelligence about information in the organization, we also want to reduce costs associated with this and risk. So if you're storing information that you shouldn't be storing, that's risk. Getting rid of old communications that you no longer need to keep is an important part of that. But two, then if we do need to keep it, we want to make sure that we're storing it in the right place, using the right tiers, and we want to think about, particularly with print streams, a lot of this runs on mainframes, how we move this information into the cloud, into lower cost operating environments, lower cost storage environments. So increase compliance, reduce risk, and reduce costs at the same time. Critical driver for modernization. All right, we touched on cloud and cloud as a driver for modernization. And literally all of our customers have cloud initiatives, and literally the conversations we have with customers today, it's no longer about should I deploy on premises or in the cloud. It's really a conversation about, look, I'm going to deploy in the cloud. Is it your cloud? Is it a vendor managed cloud? Or is it our cloud, a self-managed cloud? In the old days of kind of the on-premise cloud conversation, the cloud conversation was also really kind of a one-size-fits-all conversation. Your choice was a vendor who gave you on-premise technology or a vendor who gave you kind of a vendor-managed cloud offering. And what we're finding today, particularly for our customers, is, look, no journey to the cloud is the same. So some of them want to use, for example, a Nuxio managed cloud, a vendor managed cloud environment. Some of them want to run in their own cloud environments. You see some examples here: GCP, AWS, Azure, Red Hat. So as you're thinking about cloud, your organization may have specific requirements for what cloud they prefer to run on, and you really should think about a vendor that can support all your different choices from a cloud perspective. We also see from a hybrid deployment standpoint that there are some requirements where customers are forced to deal with data sovereignty issues, data locality issues, and therefore they need to think about perhaps operating in the cloud, but perhaps storing information in different locations. So having that flexibility, not only to run in your preferred cloud environment, but also to store information where you need to store information to comply with regulations, particularly for our global customers, is very, very important. Bottom line with cloud is we need to support customer preference. We need to help customers take whatever path to the cloud they want to take. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting deeply into architecture. I do want to point out that not all cloud architectures are the same. And when people talk about cloud, they mean a lot of different things. They could mean a multi-tenant, self-managed, cloud-only offering. They could mean that they took a legacy ECM product, wrapped it up, containerized it, and they now offer it in the cloud. So when we talk about cloud, a lot of times we talk about being a cloud native offering. And I would argue that you really need to think about cloud native technologies here. And kind of the key hallmarks of cloud native technologies, individually scalable services. You see kind of on the right some examples here of different underlying technologies that cloud native offerings make use of. So Elasticsearch, MongoDB Atlas, these are all separate cloud services, and they can be scaled up and down to your needs as you see different volumes, different requirements, different numbers of users hitting the system at the same time, so on and so forth. Cloud native offerings are elastic, which means they scale up and they scale down based on your needs. This is particularly important for self-managed customers because the cost of the infrastructure under your offering will vary based on the demands that are placed on top of your environment. Some vendors try to kind of hide this from you. They have vendor offered services. They say you don't need to worry about that. But if you're going to run this yourself, you want the most efficient platform possible. You want a platform that scales horizontally, uses commodity hardware, supports things like multi-tier archiving. That's the Glacier support, using some of those less costly storage tiers for content that you don't need to access frequently. You want them to think about things like how they use serverless compute capabilities, like Amazon Lambda, for compute intensive activities, which is much cheaper than deploying more compute capacity on Amazon for some of your high volume, high performance use cases. Edge caching, CDNs. We talk about this simply from the standpoint of, as you deal with video, audio, and other rich media formats, they're big, and you want to be able to move them closer to your users so they can get access to them more quickly. And then finally, when you think about having kind of an open architecture here, and this is one of the true benefits of cloud native, you're thinking about technologies that are easier to integrate, easier to plug into your existing environment, and will help you make that move to the cloud much, much more easily. So we've talked about kind of 4 key reasons to modernize. We talked about smarter content, talked about new content types, new compliance regulations, and the importance of cloud in that environment. Let me kind of pull all this together and give you some real customer examples of where we've done this and how people are benefiting from more modern content services platforms in this environment. First one is a top UK bank, and they're actually not a top UK bank. Our deployment is in the United Kingdom with the banking organization. This is actually Santander. They are a global bank. In fact, they are a top 5 global bank. Our initial deployment here, though, is in the UK. And just in the United Kingdom here, they had 2.5 billion documents running on an existing IBM platform. In fact, it was 7 different deployments of IBM in their environment. And what they found was that they had a huge volume of documents that were spread across different locations in their organization, different instances of their IBM system. This is also where we first ran across GDPR as a compliance mandate, and their inability to work with print stream content and be able to comply with what they call subject access requests, or where individual customers request to know what information they have and perhaps request to have that information deleted. So this was a great example of a company who had an extreme volume of content. They had increasing regulatory compliance mandates, and they had a mandate to modernize in their organization to really adopt a more agile DevOps approach to working with content, with information inside their organization. Now, their first step on this path is they actually tried to build something themselves. They started out with Hadoop. They started out with some tools and began to build their own enterprise content management platform. When we were able to engage with them and talk to them, and this goes back to that cloud architecture matters piece, really explain to them how we were already making use of a lot of those modern cloud technologies, but had done the work to really incorporate all of the core enterprise content management capabilities that they needed. The other challenge for them organizationally was just they are a very rapidly growing banking organization. And so the more they grew, the more information they had, the more diverse and disparate and spread across different systems it was. So lots of challenges in organization. They wanted to replace those legacy IBM systems. They also immediately wanted to plug into existing customer service systems. What we've been able to do there is move their existing 2.5 billion objects across to the Nuxio platform. In the process, we've substantially reduced the cost for their organization. And one of the first examples of how we're improving the customer experience here is, and a demand for modernization is, the first deployment really was a new mobile app that enabled personalized statement delivery. Now, this is print stream data that is now being converted into PDF documents and delivered individually to customers via a mobile application environment. One of the other benefits we see in terms of breaking out some of these legacy print stream environments is that we can improve access across different devices. We can also address accessibility requirements. So for perhaps handicapped consumers of information, visually impaired, people who need larger format fonts, people who need audio translations of information that they're sending out. We can support all of those things by breaking that out. So we were able to deliver a new mobile app for personalized statement delivery. We were able to enable them both from a content and from a process management standpoint to properly respond to these subject access requests. But more importantly, when you talk to Norman Wren, who was kind of our key customer here at Santander, what they really wanted to do was put in place a modern platform that gave them a foundation for ongoing digital transformation in their organization, allowed them to kind of adopt a DevOps approach to digitalization, to deploying new apps, new services, new products on top of this environment. Now, one more quick example for you, and I'll move through this one quickly because I recognize I'm running a little bit over time, is a very, very similar circumstance in a top 10 US property and casualty insurer. Now, this is a Fortune 100 company. They're a top 10 P&C insurer in the United States, and they were running on a FileNet P8 platform that was initially deployed in the 1990s. That FileNet platform had become very expensive, very difficult to maintain. They have over 2 billion objects, again, in that environment. And perhaps more importantly for them, they're supporting actually 32,000 users across 7 different lines of business in their organization with this platform. In fact, they have over 100 applications that they have in their environment that are accessing content from this platform. And what had happened over time was that this kind of aging infrastructure, this legacy platform, had begun to be viewed as an electronic file cabinet for content. Also, the team that supported it was terrified of depending on a 20-year-old solution for supporting all of these different critical functions inside the organization. There was a lot of complexity to managing it. There was a lot of difficulty and cost in managing it, and there was a lot of risk in managing this solution. What this company really liked about Nuxeo was that, one, we gave them a cloud native solution. So Nuxeo is actually operating this solution. It's a vendor managed cloud deployment for this customer. And they like the fact that our service ran on top of AWS. So here we have a Fortune 100 customer running on top of Nuxeo's cloud offering. More importantly for them, they liked the fact that a modern platform kind of gave them this extraction layer through the APIs. And if you think about a platform that has to go in and replace an existing product that over the last 20 years they've plugged into over 100 different applications, kind of having an open API layer and this data abstraction layer to allow them to quickly replace and reintegrate across all of these different existing applications becomes really, really important to their organization. During our initial testing, they also looked at our performance, and our solution outperformed their existing legacy solution, which really gave them confidence that they could build day forward on top of the Nuxeo platform. Finally, they were very interested in our rich media management capabilities, our ability to work with photos, video, audio files, and again, going back to that modern claims process, those are critical artifacts that are now a reality in their day-to-day business. The outcomes here, one, we gave them a significant reduction in overall total cost of ownership. Common theme here, kind of taking costs out of the organization. Obviously, we gave them the ability to manage not just documents and scanned images, but rich media. But the most important thing here, and literally the quote is kind of moving out of the basement into the boardroom. We gave them the ability to be viewed instead of as the file cabinet guys. The IT management team that's associated with this project is now known as kind of the modernization enablers, and they have strategic influence in the organization. So a lot of times when we talk to IT organizations, they're really looking at how they engage with business, how they deliver value to the business. And the bottom line for them was they were able to give the business kind of the requisite speed, agility, and flexibility to really offer innovative new services, new products to customers that will allow the organization to digitally transform, to thrive. So two examples here really of where we are helping to empower the existing IT organization to deliver new services, new capabilities to the business that in turn help the business to differentiate from the competition. Now, the final question we typically get from customers is, great, I buy in, I want to think about how I modernize my environment, how I enable smarter content, how I deal with new content types, so on and so forth. How do I get from where I am today to there? And the critical thing that we talk to customers about, and I'm just going to build this slide out for you, is taking a more rational approach to modernization. Starting small, starting intelligently, and moving over time. And one of the key things that a modern content platform should enable for you is the ability to connect to existing information sources. We talked about kind of bridging the silos in the organization. Where we see people really struggle is when they come and say, look, I'm going to just do everything at once, move everything at once, get onto a more modern platform. Not very realistic for an organization, for example, that has over 100 existing applications that are currently running on a legacy environment. So what we really allow them to do is first connect their existing data and content sources in their organization, integrate multiple repositories, get more value out of those existing systems, identify high return activities that they can modernize and move today so they can get rapid ROI from their investment. But more importantly, as you kind of insert that layer and enable that connectivity, you really establish a foundation for modernization. The pieces underneath don't necessarily all need to move at once, as long as you kind of have that data layer, that federated layer that really allows you to access both new content from your new repository as well as existing content from existing repositories. Now you have that foundation that you can move forward with. So we kind of begin with this approach of connect, and then over time we work with customers to begin to consolidate. How do we migrate content, data, and begin to retire some of these legacy systems, which over time will decrease total cost of ownership, deliver a lot of the cost savings that organizations are targeted on, reduce reliance on legacy systems, and help our customers get to the cloud, move a lot of this information from on-premise technologies into a cloud-native platform, and ultimately get to the point where they have a single future-proof platform that they can build off of and really will be the continuing foundation for their information management needs inside their organization moving forward. So again, when we talk about a rational approach, what we're really talking about is application rationalization. Figure out the things you need to move today, figure out the things that you need to move later, and finally figure out the things that you don't need to move at all. And then kind of take that rational approach to moving very thoughtfully, in a very risk-free fashion from point A to point B to finally getting you to that point where you have a modern platform that you can really build forward from, that delivers on those TCO benefits and gives you the foundation for your future. So very quickly in summary, I hope we've done a good job today of kind of presenting, some key reasons why you need to think about modernization, some good examples of customers, big customers who have already gone through this process, both from a self-managed perspective in the case of Santander, and a Nuxio managed perspective in the case of our insurance example. And then hopefully we've given you at least a taste of, hey, look, you don't have to do all this at once. This isn't just about cost savings. This is really about enabling the future of your organization and helping you move forward to address more modern customer requirements, more modern business requirements in your organization. So with that, I thought, Eve, maybe we could open up for some questions.